Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. My name is Jasmine Hartenstein, and I work for the Office of Community Affairs at the County of San Mateo. And I'm actually joined by my colleague, Jenny Llamas, who is also an Immigrant Services Coordinator for OCA, and our colleague, Sandra Becerra,
Hello,
who
everyone.
is an Outreach Coordinator at the Office of Community Affairs. So I would like to thank Erin Quinn from ILRC, who will be presenting today. If you want to say hi, Erin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erin. Thanks for joining us.
And then we also have Hope Nakamura from the Legal Aid Society, who will be joining us as well. So before we begin, this is a presentation about public charge and how it has been changing since COVID-19. And so we'll go into that information. We also have some resources that the county has, as well as some of the providers in our area like Legal Aid Society and Libre. All questions can be submitted via the chat box, and we have Sandy who will be filtering those questions in either during the presentation or at the very end. We will be recording this webinar and posting it on our website after, and then hopefully doing a comprehensive Q&A to go over what was asked so that we can still continue to present this information to our community members. So without further ado, we will have Jenny Llamas from OCA start presenting a little bit about the resources that our county has provided.
So hi, everyone. So we want to start off the presentation kind of just talking about the resources that our office has made in response to COVID-19. We literally get so many emails every day about different resources that are being posted. So we kind of wanted to have one main hub of all the information, a lot of information specific to San Mateo County, but also kind of nationwide and around the area. So we created a website. So on our website, the Immigrant Services, you'll find this resource page. So it's basically, we just wanted to ensure that the community has access, like I said, and so we've compiled this list, and then many of the resources are available to all residents regardless of immigration status. So on the next slide, we kind of took a screenshot of what that website looks like, or what that web page looks like. So you can see here that we've separated it by all the different types of resources. So if you're looking for something specific, then you can see here the financial resources. We also have food resources. We also have housing resources. So it's really just dependent on what you're looking for, because we wanted to really try to keep it organized. And then when you open a tab, there'll be asterisks. And so next to the asterisks, the resources that indicates if it's available to undocumented residents. And so important to note that this list is intended as a comprehensive, or it's not intended as a comprehensive list, and so we will update it regularly, so please check back. You can also email us on the left, communityaffairs@smcgov.org. You can see that there. And so you can email us resources if you have found something and you are like, oh, this is a really good resource, but I don't see it on this website. Go ahead and email us, and then we can go ahead and add that to the web page, or to the resources there. And so you can also see here, we have important links as well. So on the left, you'll see that we have department service modifications. And so basically what that means is just all the different departments have kind of, in San Mateo County, have kind of come together and put how they're operating now. So their hours, and if they're working from home, or if their office is still open. So we have that there. We also have city-specific information. So if you live in Belmont, or if you live in Redwood City and you want that specific information, you can go ahead and click there. And then we also have the shelter-in-place FAQ, so just questions that come up in regards to the shelter-in-place order. And then on the right, you can see different videos that we have. So our very own Sandy made a video in Spanish about the shelter-in-place order. And then we also have other videos there. And then we also have important county links. So the San Mateo County Strong that you could, when you click that, you'll see basically the fund that San Mateo County has created. And so more information is there. And so we just created this website because we really just wanted to have one main page for all resources located in the county of San Mateo. So thank you.
All right. So before I begin, again, thank you, Erin Quinn from ILRC. She'll be presenting information about public charge. We ask that no case-specific questions get asked. If you do want to ask that, we'll refer you to one of our local legal service providers like Legal Aid, who do consultations still, even amid COVID-19, in regards to any type of case-specific questions in relation to public charge or immigration or benefits. So Erin, take it away.
Great, thank you. I'm excited to be with everyone today and hoping we can all enjoy being in community for a few minutes to chat about the issues we might have questions about. So today we're just going to be focusing a little bit around the intersection of maybe what I'll just call fears in our community around accessing care and public charge, particularly in light of the crisis we're in around COVID-19. So I imagine a lot of you might have specific questions or concerns. What we've prepared for you all today is a little bit of a deep dive into immigration law to talk a little bit about what public charge means, if you'd heard about that in the news, who's impacted, and how it relates also to COVID-19 care, resources, programs, benefits. So we'll start with just talking about what public charge is, who's affected, what benefits are considered, a look at USCIS response now, given where we're at and COVID-19. And then I'll pass it back to my colleagues to talk a little bit more about what help is available and resources locally. So if we can just look at the next slide. I think when we use the word public charge, it gets really confusing because in the community, I think what we're really dealing with, and for some of the folks on this call, is trying to understand all the messages coming from our government in the last few years and what it means in terms of maybe you're hearing this word public charge, or maybe you're just hearing negative press or negative comments made around immigrants and their ability to use programs or benefits or services. So when we use this word public charge, it might be that some folks don't even know what we're talking about, but they might have different concerns in their head about what it means or what's happening around using public benefits in general right now. It might mean that they're hearing the news, they're hearing policies from our government, and they're worried that it means their family can't use health care because they think it will trigger deportation, or they think it means that if I use public benefits, I won't be able to naturalize. The bigger concern we often hear, which is actually not true about our immigration law, is that it's a concern that if you sign up for something with the government or a county or a program or a benefit, that the government will be using that information to deport you or your family or come to your house. And so we really want to make sure that we're starting with talking to people about what is public charge and what it isn't, because often for these really big fears, we have good answers, and we can say in general that you can sign up for things that you're eligible for without concern that the government is coming to your house to deport you. So going to the next slide, what does it really mean when we use this word public charge? And if we just click it again, public charge is a test that we use to determine if someone is likely to depend on public benefits in the future. And it's not just any public program, it's specific certain benefits that the government will look at. And so if we click again, it'll show the next part, which says this new rule is really what we're hearing in the press, not changing what our law is overall, but giving some new pointers, parameters, and rules for officers to follow when they make decisions in immigration cases around public charge. And we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about what this test is and what are they looking for when they try to decide if someone's going to become a public charge in the future. Before we even get into that, let's go to the next slide. When we look at this in immigration then, one thing we know right away is that public charge is only about that middle blue box on your screen. So if you're concerned or the question is, do I qualify for a benefit or program, any benefit or program, healthcare, unemployment insurance, Medi-Cal, Medicaid, anything like this, eligibility is not related to public charge. So if somebody in a county office or some program person knows that you are eligible for a benefit, public charge does not affect that eligibility, and people can still use any program that they're eligible for. Going to the last box, the red box, is will they use information I turn in to get a benefit to deport me? And there we have good answers too, which is this public charge rule is not about immigration enforcement. We generally know that information submitted to agencies for healthcare or signing up for public benefit programs isn't used by the federal government for immigration enforcement. That's not how they do immigration enforcement, and generally they don't have access or share the private information that is gathered to sign up for benefits. So when we talk about public charge and immigration law, all we're talking about is if I use a certain benefit and program, will it affect my immigration status or options in the future? And so that's really what we're going to be talking about today. When we go to the next slide, one of the most important messages we have is that public charge doesn't apply to many immigrants and their family members. So refugees, asylees, special immigrant juveniles, people that have U visas or T visas, folks that are applying for DACA or TBS, all of these different immigration statuses have no public charge test. Applying to become a U.S. citizen has no public charge test. So and also U.S. citizens in general. So if you have a family where a U.S. citizen child is interested in signing up for a benefit, there'll never be a public charge test for that U.S. citizen. This is to say that when we're talking with families, everyone is in different immigration statuses, and many of these immigration statuses don't worry about public charge at all. If we look at the next slide, taking this just a little bit further, one thing that we get a lot of questions about are about green card holders or permanent residents. And the reason we get a lot of questions about eligibility or public charge concerns for permanent residents is that permanent residents might qualify for some of the benefits that they talk about in the public charge rule. And so it's really important to know that this new public charge rule that people are talking about does not impact permanent residents generally, that a green card holder is not subject to this new rule. And also, if somebody is here in the United States undocumented, if they're not coming forward now in order to get an immigration benefit in the moment, they're not applying for an immigration status or benefit, then there's no public charge test to apply to them. So public charge is only going to apply when someone comes forward to get an immigration benefit. Let's go to the next slide. So the main takeaway here is that many immigrants and their families aren't even subject to a public charge test. So before we start worrying about public charge, the first step is figuring out if public charge even applies. And as I said, in most families, there might not be a public charge test in this moment. We'll talk about who public charge might apply to, and for those folks, it's good to talk to a legal services provider, and we'll have more information about that at the end of this call. Look at the next slide. So thinking again about our green card holders, just a reminder that there is no public charge test to become a U.S. citizen. So applying for naturalization, renewing a green card, None of those have a public charge test. We can move forward. So an important thing here is just the takeaway being that public charge does not apply to folks renewing their green cards or applying for citizenship. And then I want to spend a few minutes talking about the new public charge rule, because that is why this has been in the news a lot. Public charge is part of our immigration laws and have been part of our immigration laws for some time, but it's the new rule on the next slide that is causing concern for many folks today. And so if we can just skip one more slide, we can talk about what's included in the new rule. So as of February 24th of this year, there's a new rule in immigration law and for officers making decisions on immigration applications for green cards around what it means to be a public charge. And this new rule included a new definition of public charge. It added a whole bunch of public benefits at the federal level that could harm somebody that is subject to a public charge test. And also, where we are most concerned, it gave a lot of information about how officers are supposed to weigh all the factors in a person's life and what their family makeup is to decide, looking at all the negative and positive factors in someone's life, whether or not they're likely to be a public charge in the future. So we'll just look at these briefly to think about what this new rule means for those that do have applications in front of an immigration officer. Generally, this means like an application for a green card pending. The first is about the definition. The definition for public charge changed from the idea of somebody who was likely to become primarily dependent on government support for income. This is the next slide. And so that meant that they were only considering people that used cash aid. All other government support programs like nutrition, food stamps, healthcare, none of that under our old rules would be looked at by an immigration officer. Under this new rule that is now in effect, they consider someone to be a public charge if it is more likely than not that in the future, somebody would receive one or more public benefits for more than 12 months within a 36-month period. And then with that definition, they changed what benefits that they would look at. So remember, until February 24th, an officer would only consider cash aid benefits and long-term care. And under the new rule, they'll consider more things. So let's talk about what benefits an immigration officer might consider. Looking to the next slide. And in order to have this conversation, we're going to start by talking about all the things that are not included in a public charge test if you do have an application in front of immigration. So the first is that the rule lists things very specifically. Anything that is not listed in the immigration rule will not count in a public charge test. So on our screen right now are lots of examples of programs that are safe for immigrant families to use, even if they have an application that might have a public charge test. That includes things like emergency medical care, support for mothers and children under the WIC program, all school-based programs like nutrition services, the free and reduced meals, free lunch, Head Start, public education in general, anything where someone pays into the system like unemployment and Social Security retirement, tax credits. None of these things will count against an immigrant. They should make sure that they're using programs that they need or that their family members need. And there's even more exceptions than this. So moving on to the next slide. We can skip to the one that says state-funded programs. The other thing about this rule is it doesn't consider negatively programs that are funded by the state, so our state of California, or the county or any locality. It's really only concerned with certain very specific federally funded programs. So here for us in San Mateo and in California generally, we offer health insurance through Medi-Cal to many different folks in our communities, including all children up to age 26, including folks that have DACA. In addition, we have programs at the local level to supply housing for certain individuals or other programs. Those state-funded programs for healthcare and housing do not count against someone who's worried about public charge. Also, the use of services by family members doesn't count against a person. So that's really good to remember, that if your children qualify for certain benefits, they can continue to use those benefits that they qualify for. Let's go ahead to the next slide. The bigger concern some people are worrying about then is they're noticing that I haven't said what types of benefits do count against a person. And so that's on our next slide. The list of public benefits that are problematic under a public charge test are limited to the ones here on this slide now, which includes only cash assistance, as well as Medicaid through federally funded programs. So again, if it's a Medi-Cal program that's funded by California or the county, it doesn't count. This would be federal Medicaid, food stamps like CalFresh, Section 8 housing, and federal public housing. Those are the only types of benefits that could harm someone in a public charge test. And again, if they're state funded, they don't count against a person. So if you have confusion around what type of benefit your family might be receiving, there's a couple things to keep in mind, which is for these federal benefits that are listed on the screen, those folks that are undocumented generally do not qualify for these programs. So if you're looking to apply for a green card and don't currently have status, it is unlikely that you're receiving these federally funded programs. Maybe someone in your family does. Maybe there is a child in your household that is a US citizen and qualifies for a Medicaid program or a CalFresh food stamp program. But remember that the use of those benefits by your family members will not count directly against you. And public charge, again, only comes up if you're turning in an immigration application. It can't apply to you just by being a member of the community. It would only come into play if you're ready to apply for a green card. Let's go to the next slide. We already talked about a lot of immigration statuses are exempt from public charge. There's also specific rules around the benefits that they're looking at. Because this rule just became effective February 24th, using any of those newly added benefits like Medicaid or food stamps before that date won't harm someone because they weren't part of the rule until February 24th. Also, there are exceptions not just for all those immigration statuses I already mentioned, like U visa holders, asylees, but also family members of military. And so there are several exceptions that come into play. And just remember, use of these benefits by your family members that might qualify won't count against a person who's applying for an immigration benefit. Let's go to the next slide. So we've sort of talked a little bit about what public charge is. It's a test applied by an immigration officer for somebody who is coming forward in immigration to apply for usually a green card or the permission to enter the United States. So this test is not used for immigration enforcement. It's not used if somebody signs up for a benefit. It is only if somebody comes forward and applies for a visa application to enter the United States or to become a permanent resident. If you're not doing one of these things, you really don't have to worry about this public charge rule. Let's go to the next slide. So there's a lot of laws and rules around issues that would keep somebody from getting admitted to the United States, for keeping them from getting a green card or entering the US. And public charge is just one of them. Some of the other things that officers already look for are things like looking for certain criminal convictions or whether you ever lied to an immigration officer before. Public charge is just one of those things that is looked at when somebody applies saying, I want to become a permanent resident of the United States. That's where public charge is assessed. It's not something that's going to apply to all immigrants or all families. Let's go to the next slide. So taking all of this together and thinking through where we are, it means that this test mainly impacts those that are just now ready to immigrate through a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident family member. If you're not ready to turn in an application and immigrate, or you don't have any status at all, then public charge is not something you need to worry about. Instead, you need to worry about what benefits are you eligible for, and what types of programs or safety planning you can do to keep your family fed, healthy, and safe. For those of you that are thinking about what's happening in the immigration agencies, we have an update on that in the next couple of slides. So if we can go there. So the office that's in charge of hearing immigration applications when somebody does apply to become a green card holder is USCIS, or the Citizenship and Immigration Services. And they have provided updates about how they're thinking about their rules and their process and their policies given the situation we are in with COVID-19. So if we look at the next slide, we'll just talk about that real briefly. The first thing is that for public charge, they have already put a specific announcement that COVID-19 treatment or testing will not hurt somebody as a public charge concern. They will not consider that as a negative factor in public charge determination. So folks can get the screening, the treatment, the health care they need related to COVID-19. In addition, all emergency Medi-Cal is already exempt from public charge. Folks that need to go into an emergency room or get emergency services don't have to worry about that counting in a public charge test. So folks really should get the care that they need. If you do already have an application pending with immigration, we can look at the next slide for a moment. And that is just to say that the immigration offices locally are currently closed. So if you do have an immigration emergency or need immediate help, it's best to contact a local nonprofit legal services provider to help you navigate how to get emergency services. If you need something, for instance, like help getting a travel document, you might want to reach out to a legal service provider to help you, because right now the offices are closed to the public. Most immigration court hearings have stopped going forward for the moment unless somebody is detained, and they are doing those over video. If you do have a current application pending, they've stopped taking fingerprints or biometrics at the support center offices that do that. Those offices are also closed. And so all of this together means that also naturalization ceremonies, interviews on applications, all of that is now halted while we are in this current crisis. And we are advocating with immigration to see if they can do limited services, maybe through video, and also to try to get them to extend employment authorization cards and things like this if they are not able to process applications. For now, we know that if folks have renewed their work authorization, that if they already have fingerprints on file with immigration, they'll go ahead and process those applications and not wait for the offices to reopen for them to go back in for what we call their biometrics or fingerprints. And so with that, we'll just go to the next slide.
Quick question, Erin. This is coming from
Sure.
Nora Razone. She asks, if you are a lawful permanent resident or U.S. citizen and receive public benefits, can that impact you petitioning for a family member?
That's a really great question. So the question is about somebody with status like permanent resident or U.S. citizen might be one of the people that can turn in a petition for a family member to immigrate. And if they use benefits or services, can that impact that application to help the family member? So that is a question that's a little tough right now under our current policies. There is a little bit of policy notes that the officers have in the new manual related to the new rule that says if someone is sponsoring an immigrant to come, they can consider that person's true ability and willingness to pay and actually be a support. And so one of the things that USCIS says they can look at is whether that family has sufficient resources and whether they need public benefits, because they say that that might mean they don't actually have the resources to pay. However, we don't think this is a reason somebody who is eligible for benefits and needs those benefits should not get them. Because if you're already at a low enough income to qualify for those important services, it means that in order to immigrate that family member, most likely that family is going to need what we call a joint sponsor, a second person to help support that application financially. So generally speaking, in most cases, it's going to be more important that that permanent resident or U.S. citizen gets the help and support and care they need, even though being low income doesn't help them petition a family member. There might be better ways to overcome that obstacle by getting a joint sponsor, other things in place to help the family immigrate.
And we have one more question from Angie Luna. What happens if I have a TM visa and I am applying for a green card? How can I be affected, or can the process be affected?
So anyone coming forward to apply for a green card, unless you were applying through one of those statuses I mentioned, there could be a public charge test applied. But for many of those visas that also have to do with work, the idea that somebody has a strong employment option and good income usually means that those factors are going to be very positive factors in the case. If we look at the next slide real quick, the one thing I just wanted to highlight is that every case, once you are somebody like in that last question that is eligible to apply for a green card, that's a good time to check in on your specific case with a legal practitioner, because at that point, really every case is different, and that's a good time to get a consultation. So in that last example, it was somebody who really was about to turn in an application. So once we talk about that, it's probably good to have somebody look at the specifics of your situation and make sure you're getting good advice.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think this would be a good time to maybe think about what are the resources locally, and maybe turn it over to Hope for a few minutes and then take other questions after.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Erin. We will now be joined by Hope from the Legal Aid Society in San Mateo County. Hope, are you on the line?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes. Would you like me to undo your video?
Sure, just so people can see me.
Okay. We wanted to verify it was you first.
Great. I know that.
Hello, Hope.
Hello. So yes. So that was a great presentation by Erin to explaining very difficult concepts. And it's oftentimes difficult for people out in the field who are helping immigrants apply for benefits or talk about benefits, determine whether or not public charge actually affects them or not. And so the Libre project at the Legal Aid Society created some tools to help people go through that analysis without having to talk to an immigration lawyer in the first instance. But let me step back first and just explain that Libre is linking immigrants to benefits, resources, and education. We are collaborative of many community organizations like Nuestra Casa, CoSite Hope, and Redwood City 2020 that provides immigration outreach and education to immigrant communities about safety net services and public charge. We also have 3 assister sites where we help immigrants and other people, anybody actually, apply for benefits. If they want to apply and need assistance, they can go to either CoSite Hope or Fair Oaks Community Center or Job Train to get help applying for benefits. And then we also try to provide accurate information about immigration options. So to speak to somebody, you can dial the number that's on the screen or visit our website at thelibreproject.org. Can you go to the next slide? So as I mentioned, it's oftentimes difficult for people who are either immigrants themselves or people out supporting immigrants to access these benefits, especially now when other income sources might be drying up and they may not be eligible for unemployment benefits, but they might have family members who are eligible for public benefits themselves to get answers to whether or not their immigration status is at risk. And so we've developed 2 resources with immigrant lawyer experts and public benefit experts to help people walk through that process. So you could either go to keepyourbenefitsca.org, and that website will walk you through, or will explain, first of all, what public charge is, and then provides a guide in Spanish and Chinese or English, where an immigrant or anyone, in fact, can put in an immigration status and find out whether or not there's a public charge concern for that person with that kind of status. Alternatively, we've developed with Community Connect Labs a texting tool, which is a very simple tool that doesn't even talk about public benefits, because as Erin pointed out, oftentimes people don't even talk about benefits in terms of public charge. They just wonder whether or not getting benefits is going to be a problem. They can text to that number on the screen, either in Spanish, Libre to get it in Spanish, benefits to get it in English. It's also available in Chinese and Vietnamese. And that will just take them through a few questions to ask them what immigration status they're asking about and whether or not they have to be concerned about getting benefits. And it also provides links to legal services programs where they can get their specific immigration questions answered. In San Mateo County, there are several legal services programs that are available to give immigration advice, and we are really encouraging people to utilize those services rather than rely on notarios or perhaps private immigration attorneys who don't understand public benefits law, because their general advice is for anybody. It's generally been, don't apply for any kind of benefits if you don't have to, and which is not really helpful for families who at this point in time especially might be able to benefit their families by obtaining CalFresh benefits or Medi-Cal for their family or for themselves. And so we would encourage people, and you can get to those resources by going to our website, thelibreproject.org, or by calling the Libre Project. But I'll just name them quickly here for you all, since this is in San Mateo County. We have Community Legal Services in East Palo Alto, CoSite Hope, Catholic Charities, and International Immigration of the Bay Area, and in addition to Legal Aid. And if you have any immigrants who have specific questions about public charge and just need a quick consultation, we are doing those over the phone at the Libre Project. So feel free to call us if you have any questions. And I think that's it.
Well, thank you again so much, Hope. I really appreciate you and Legal Aid and Libre being here during this time that we're all sheltering in place, still really helping our community be aware of their rights and continue to assist them in getting the benefits that they need. We have another question. If you have questions, you can direct them to me. We have limited the type of questions that are available to everyone. So Barbara Aguilar is asking, most of the families I visit, the parents are not legal residents, but their children are US citizens. In this case, if they apply for benefits for their children, such as CalFresh, would that be okay? Also, can they get cash benefits if their children are US citizens?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, technically, public charge applies only to the applicant. And so the use of those benefits by those eligible family members doesn't count directly against the parent at all. And so if you're working with a family that needs those services, generally speaking, we would encourage those family members, those U.S. citizen children, to get the care and those resources that they need. And then, of course, the main thing is also thinking about that parent is, are they even at the point where they're turning in an application, right, for an immigration benefit? Because if they're not poised to do that, they don't have someone petitioning for them right now, then absolutely that's going to be the right decision for that family. And so, yeah, generally speaking, those children can use those benefits that they qualify for. And Hope, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that.
Yes, I think what we've been telling people who are undocumented and are hoping that their either fiance or future spouse or adult child might petition for them in the future, that if it's way off in the future, really they want to make sure that they take care of theirs and their family's health and concentrate on building up their skills and income capabilities, so that when they do apply eventually, that they'll be in a better position, because the public charge rule, as you said, isn't just about income. I mean, it isn't just about benefits, it's mainly about income. And so if you're not thinking that you're going to be applying for a green card through a family member in the next 3 to 5 years, work on getting skills, work on your English, work on going to school, work on other kinds of things, and make sure your family stays healthy and that you stay healthy. Because if you forego these benefits and become unhealthy, then that could also affect your public charge determination if you have one of those. So we've really been trying to encourage people to think long term.
Okay, so that's all the questions that we've gotten from the chat box. Again, I've sent out a message through the chat box that if you have other questions or you would like a copy of this presentation, we will be posting it on our website, located at cmo.smcgov.org/immigrant services. But we can also send this presentation out. We're going to try and have it in Chinese and Spanish as well. And as a final note, before we all log off and leave, that our office is taking on census for San Mateo County and making sure that our communities are counted, specifically our immigrant community as well, because they are one of the hardest to count populations. Even though we're in this time of COVID-19 and sheltering in place, it's important to try and get our community, while they're at home, to still fill out that, that census application. Again, it's less than 10 minutes. So making sure that, you know, our community gets their fair share of funding. Again, especially right now in our time, it's funding for disaster services and emergencies, housing, transportation, school programs, hospitals. So there's information below at the bottom of the PowerPoint. And again, we can send this out, and those are clickable links. You can get information on multilingual resources. If you want to help people fill out the census in your community, smccensus.org. And then in order to fill out your census online, you can just click on 2020census.gov. Again, you can also call to get assistance with that, or wait for your mailer. But why wait if we're at home? Fill out your census today. So again, if there's any other questions, I'd like to thank Erin from ILRC, and again, Hope from Legal Aid Society, as well as the staff at OCA that helped put this presentation on, Jenny and Sandy. If you have other questions, please feel free to email us and visit our website. Thank you all so much. Bye.
Thank you all for putting this on.
Thanks, everyone.